Thank you so much, everyone, for participating today again, and those who participated last week. And thank you, Jackie, of course, Jackie Cates, who's offering her expertise on this subject today. I apologize, we're starting a few minutes late. We're trying to weed through some of our, this new technical situation for how we give out support to our families. So we're just going to give it like one more minute just to give people an opportunity to log on if they're interested in participating. And if you have questions throughout, you can post questions to the chat box. We'll try to answer them. If not, you can always, we can try to answer them at a later session as well. And you absolutely, patients and families still have the opportunity to reach out to our social workers for support, both our transplant families as well as our donor families. And Jackie will talk a little bit more about what she does to support those donor families. So our topic for today's session is exploring survivor's guilt with our Gift of Life family support staff, Jackie Cates. And we decided to focus on this topic today because we often hear from families that one particular challenge they face both before and after the transplant is around survivor's guilt. We often hear from patients and families something like, I want to be happy, but I'm having trouble because I know someone had died for me to be alive. It's completely normal. It's very common. I hear it from most of the families and patients that I work with. And transplant can't actually happen for many recipients unless there is a deceased donor. And those families and the families of those donors definitely do experience grief over the loss of their loved one. So today I wanted to have Jackie talk more about some of the thoughts and feelings around survivor's guilt and the interaction that Gift of Life has with donor families to support them through the grieving process. So I'm hoping that through this session, you're able to receive some comfort hearing about the support and care that Gift of Life does provide the families of organ and tissue donors. And I hope that learning more about the perspectives of the donor families will help with those natural feelings of survivor's guilt. So again, I'm here with Jackie Cates. She's with Family Support Services with the Gift of Life Donor Program. Jackie, can you tell me about a little bit about your role at Gift of Life?
Absolutely. Well, first, I just wanted to say hi to everybody. It's very cool and interesting to be able to talk to all of you electronically with this really neat technology. So thank you for having me. As Talia mentioned, I am part of the Family Support Services Department. Our department is composed of a manager, 2 full-time social workers, a licensed counselor, and an admin. And together we provide all of the aftercare for donor families. What that looks like is we provide bereavement support for families right after they've lost a loved one up until as long and whenever they need it. We provide outreach calls, individual counseling in our office, and if a family is outside the radius of Philadelphia, we look and find resources for them locally. We coordinate and read all of the correspondence between recipients and donor families, which is one of my favorite parts of the job. We facilitate a beautiful ceremony each fall called our Life and Legacy celebrations, which honor donors and their families and the Gift of Life. And we're also very involved in the community relations department and helping them coordinate all the amazing events that we do through the year. And that's our job in a nutshell. We're jack of all trades and there just to support our donor families as best as possible.
Great, thank you for that. Could you share a little bit more about what the interaction with the donor families sometimes looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really there to provide support for families anytime during their grief experience. As we know, grief just doesn't go away, and sometimes it may hit us when an important date comes up, like an anniversary or a holiday, and otherwise it may just be a really normal day, and they find themselves really missing their loved one and want someone to talk to. So we're really there to normalize grief experiences and make sure that our families feel heard and supported no matter what it is they're experiencing. Um, families, Donor families are grieving the same ways as anybody else grieves. There's just the unique component of donation and the fact that their loved one was able to give the gift of life or to enhance someone's life is an enormous legacy that their loved one has the opportunity to fulfill. And a lot of times that brings comfort to families that in their darkest, most tragic moment in their lives, their loved one was able to help somebody else. And that is a really significant piece to their grieving process.
That's wonderful. And I know personally as well, at the family house, we often have some volunteers, either through our home cook heroes or other volunteer aspects to our donor families. And they truly enjoy to be connected to transplant recipients, whether, it's their own that their loved one had donated to, or just any transplant recipient. And it's really meaningful for them to stay connected, to remember their loved one.
Absolutely.
So can you tell us a little bit about what is survivor's guilt?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you mentioned earlier, Talia, I think it's really important to just emphasize that this is a really normal experience and it doesn't make it any easier to process or cope with, but it's really important for all transplant recipients and also their family members or caregivers to know that they're not alone in feeling this way. So survivor's guilt, the core definition is a sense of deep guilt that comes from when someone survives something. So it really is derived from situations where someone has experienced and survived something life-threatening. And the first documentation of survivor's guilt was really around the Holocaust. And we started seeing increased conversations about survivor's guilt probably around 9/11, where first responders, people in the Twin Towers who survived that horrendous situation were really feeling guilty that they had lived through it, whereas coworkers, community members, family, friends did not. So really it doesn't have to be attributed to these big events like the Holocaust, like 9/11. It can be smaller circumstances, but they still feel life-threatening and life-changing to the person experiencing them. So really the question is, why did I survive? Why did I get this transplant? Why did I get this life-saving gift where another person didn't, or where someone had to die for me to get this gift? And that's really how it relates directly to transplant.
Thank you. And I've heard that from people, like, why did I survive when someone else didn't? And some transplant recipients will even, or I've heard would compare to, like, should I get this transplant? I've already lived so many years. There's other people who need transplants who, children or younger adults. So I feel like it really is on a spectrum, the feelings of, why me versus someone else.
Yeah, and it's not always, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It's not always connected directly to the donor family. A lot of times I hear recipients are a part of a wonderful support group through their transplant center, and they become really close to other either candidates that are waiting that transplant. And when it's their turn, when that call comes, they really struggle with the fact that, oh, that person in the support group that I sit next to every day, they've been waiting for this amount of years, or they seem more ill than I do. Why didn't they get that call and I did? So there's definitely multiple sides to the coin in relation to transplant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it really does sound like it's just this very normal experience for most transplant recipients or their family members.
Yeah.
So what type of feelings would you normally hear or associate with survivor's guilt specific to the transplant recipient experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the primary one that we hear is just feelings of not feeling worthy of this gift. And really wondering, kind of like I just said, like, why me? Why not this person? Why not that person? And also feeling worried about the expectations of the donor family. What would the donor family want me to be like? What if I don't meet their expectations? What if they were expecting, a young, athletic, smart individual, and I'm older and perhaps not as active, or I don't have a life full of charity work. I'm really feeling like they owe the donor family to meet those expectations. Also feeling a lot of pressure, like they have to have a speedy recovery. They have to remain healthy and well to really maintain this life-saving gift, and that's a lot of pressure and a lot of worry. And there can be feelings about that recovery, especially if it's not a straightforward recovery. Oftentimes there may be experiences with rejection, or there may be some speed bumps along the way, and feeling undeserving because those experiences occurred. And also the idea that they have to be good enough stewards for this gift. Like they have to do everything possible to demonstrate that they were the right person for this gift, and that they deserve this transplant.
And that's a really great segue into my next question, which is, in your experience working with donor families, what types of thoughts have they shared with you over the years about survivor's guilt?
Yeah. So most families, I would say the majority, do not want their loved ones' recipients to feel guilty. And it's very easy to say, don't feel guilty, but if that's an experience that's happening, then it's valid and you can't wish that away. But families always emphasize that they would not want their loved one's recipient to feel guilty. They would want their loved one's recipient to be able to do everything with this second chance that they weren't able to do when they were sick. And they really see these individuals as a continuing legacy of their loved one, and their loved one isn't going to have the opportunity to continue life in the way that their trajectory was looking like, and recipients now have the opportunity to do whatever it is they want to in a healthy, more meaningful way. A lot of families, and this is a quote directly from a donor family that I've really had the pleasure of working with, through appropriate channels and correspondence, she did end up meeting one of her son's recipients who really struggled with survivor's guilt for a long time. And this donor mother told the recipient, she said, listen, if it was between you and my son, I would pick my son. She goes, but that was not a choice. She goes, my son died, period. He was a donor, period. And I think that was just so impactful and meaningful, and really helped this recipient understand that because of the circumstances, unfortunately, this young boy was going to die, regardless of whether he was able to save lives. And that was a beautiful thing that came out of a tragedy. And many donor families feel that way.
Yeah, that's a really a great way to put it, in a sense. Like, they're two separate events that occurred, and while they're connected, they are separate.
Right.
How can you, or how would you encourage a recipient and their family to best support themselves when they're experiencing, or if they're experiencing survivor's guilt?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing, Talia, is really embrace what you're feeling. As I said earlier, you know, sometimes it's really uncomfortable to have difficult feelings, but it happens, and it's important to sit with them and let yourself feel whatever it is you're feeling, and really know that it's normal to feel this way. And know that you're not alone in feeling this way. And you don't have to suffer through these thoughts, these feelings by yourself. There's so much support out there, whether it's through your team, Talia, and the Family House, whether it's through support groups, through your transplant center, or connecting with another recipient that you meet through Facebook or some other community forum. There are absolutely other people who have gone through this before and can be there to support you or really guide you on how they work through it every day.
Mm-hmm.
You can have guilt and also be grateful and feel relief that you are no longer waiting for a transplant, and that you have the opportunity to live a healthy, meaningful life. And the two can coexist at the same time. And that may feel strange to have a sense of such great relief and joy, and at the same time feel guilt. But those feelings can certainly happen simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great point. And someone recently had shared something like that with me. I think they were suggesting it be called the but and sort of process. So you can have these feelings, and you can have these other feelings. Like, it doesn't, you don't have to have only one feeling. You can have simultaneous feelings that might be conflicting with each other, but still are natural and normal feelings to have.
Yeah, and that also goes along with grief perfectly. You know, when you're grieving, you can have so many emotions at the same time. There's not just one day you're feeling sad and another day you're feeling another sort of way. You can feel everything at the same time. And I think also, Talia, grief is also a really important part in this. Because someone died, it is very much okay for a recipient to grieve that death and to honor their donor, whether they know anything about that person or not. I think it's important that a recipient knows they can grieve and mourn this person just as they would someone they know deeply and care about deeply. So whether that's, you know, incorporating new traditions, maybe every day on their transplant anniversary, doing something special to honor the donor, participating in donation awareness events, becoming a volunteer, or lighting a candle, something to acknowledge how it is they're feeling and really give themselves the space to recognize this hero in their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that also really reminds me of, which I know we wanted to talk about very briefly, is when recipients and families are choosing to try to communicate with their donor families, I've heard at sometimes they'll actually even send like a sympathy card because it's in support of this person's loss and their grief around it. So do you want to, I don't think you can really talk about writing to the donor family in this avenue, but do you have any like sort of last minute thoughts about communicating with the donor, and then we can segue into when we're going to have an actual session on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So many recipients and also many donor families find writing to be very therapeutic. It's a space to really, one, acknowledge gratitude for the gift, and also it's a space where you can very safely outline that I'm feeling very guilty that I'm here and your loved one isn't, and I'm so sorry for your loss. And here are all of the amazing things that I'm able to do now because of your loved one. So yes, we do see sympathy cards all the time. We also see thank you cards. We see holiday cards, and we just, sometimes we see sticky notes. It really depends. But I think it's a really amazing thing to consider because it really can be beneficial to get your words and your thoughts on paper.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jackie. This was amazing. I think you've really just offered information that I think so much helpful and important information that our families of transplant think about often, and especially now when people might be feeling more isolated than ever. I think it really brought to light some things that people might be feeling. So Jackie and I are going to try to facilitate another talk in the future about writing to your donor family. We're thinking potentially in 2 weeks, but once the date and time is, once we determine the date and time, we'll post information about it on our social media pages. So I would just suggest keep checking back. If you are, I know a lot of what we talked about today might sound like easier said than done. So if you are truly experiencing some difficulty around these feelings or any feelings related to the transplant process, please know that our social work team is still here to support families, and we can be reached via email or phone or even Zoom or Skype or FaceTime. And we certainly can help connect people to resources like Jackie mentioned, potentially other groups that are still available virtually right now, where you can connect with other families. I apologize if there were any technical difficulties while doing this, like we're still navigating this new format. But I do appreciate everyone participating, and if you have specific questions, you can reach out and we can connect you with Jackie, of course, about anything specific to what she had talked about today. And then lastly, next week, we're going to have a webinar about protecting yourself from skin cancer after transplant. So the information about that is on our social media pages. You can register. There should be a link that you can use to register. And if you have questions, of course, you can reach out. So that's it for today. Thank you so much, Jackie, for offering your expertise. I think this format worked really well. I'm really glad that, I'm really glad that we were able to connect this way.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.